And we'll get into some Seahawks stuff led by our young rookies here as they took on Arizona on Sunday.
Right. So as you said, we took on Arizona. Arizona came to town. They played at Lebanon Field, and luckily the Seahawks pulled out a win. They won that one 19-9. Our offensive players of the game here, we went with the same person, and I'll just go ahead and say it was Kenneth Walker III. So I went ahead and doubled down after, of course, seeing that you had picked him, but there was really no other option for me, considering that it felt like the offense ran through him, and no other player really got as many yards as Kenneth did. So that was my reasoning for choosing him. So I'll go ahead and hand off to you so you can explain yours.
Yeah, with having Rashad Penny out for the year now, it's tough because, again, I think we talked about this last week, having no clear standout guy to an extent since Marshawn Lynch, having it was like Thomas Rawls, CJ Procise, Chris Carson, it feels like it's like those corny graphics they do on Monday Night Football where it would be like a graveyard or whatever and Seahawks running backs and you'd see all the headstones with all these former running backs. It's been a tough ride since Marshawn, right? And even Marshawn came back for the end of the year. I believe it was 19, so it's been a tough little ride at the running back position. That continues with Rashad Penny because at the end of this past year and really as the season's kind of started, he's looked good, after dealing with injury after injury, and now back again, it's an injury and it's a season ending one. So, everybody who was happy with the Ken Walker pick when it happened, go ahead, you can celebrate. I was wrong. These things happen. I didn't mind the pick itself. It was where it was at.
Sure.
But hey, again, some of these guys get paid to do these, make these decisions. So that works out. As well as before we even continue, I know we'll talk about the rest of them on the defensive side of the ball as well. But I mean, this rookie class, we look at Charles Cross, Ken Walker, Abraham Lucas, Kobe Bryant, Tariq Woolen, all played significant impacts in this game, let alone the entirety of the season. So it's you kind of look for that class that some people get. Look at some of the past ones that Seattle's had, drafting Russell Wilson, drafting Earl Thomas, drafting Richard Sherman. Some of these different classes that were really key, and this, so far looks like it's going to be one of them. Walker, like you said, I don't think there's anybody on offense that really stood out like him. He's a guy that has carried the load in college. He, started out at Wake Forest, transferred to Michigan State, won the Doug Walker Award, I believe it was the Earl Campbell Award last year, and had a huge workload. So him being the lead back right now makes a ton of sense, and he should be able to really sustain this sort of thing. I had him in one league in fantasy, and he paid dividends. But I was just on the cautious side of things in another one where I couldn't pick him up because somebody already had him. I picked up DJ Dallas because, through the preseason, DJ Dallas had a good showing, and he didn't do much. So it really looks like Ken Walker is going to be your bell cow sort of guy. And I mean, if any this past few games, even with the Saints and now this, I think he even had some good runs against Detroit. If these are any indication of what he can do, I think Seattle should be just fine at running back.
I agree, and especially with our standing being 3-3, I think that there are other teams that we expected to have way better records that are also on with that 3-3 record. So we're not looking too bad. I'll move on to our defensive players of the game for the sake of being different this week and not going with Tariq Woolen again. I went with Jordan Brooks, who had 11 total tackles on the game, 6 solo and 5 assisted. So just a big contributor to part of why Kyler Murray wasn't able to be successful. So that was why I went with him.
That makes sense. And I know, at least from what I've seen and from some of the guys that I know, Jordan Brooks has received some criticism And I get that, but it's tough to go from Bobby Wagner, who's a surefire Hall of Famer, to, a guy who's in
Yeah.
his like second or third year now. I went with Ryan Neal just because he kind of filled up the stat sheet: 7 tackles, 6 solo, one sack, 1 tackle for loss, 1 pass deflection, 1 QB hit. I feel like I would have also gone with Tariq Woolen, but for the sake of being different, and I feel like we would have talked about him anyway, I went with Ryan Neal, who filled up the stat sheet pretty well. Woolen, I mean, what can we say? They showed a graphic during the game,
Yes.
like the side-by-side comparison with Richard Sherman's rookie year, really similar in height. We're 1 draft pick difference. I believe Woolen was 153, Sherman was 154. Both wide receivers converted to cornerbacks from college. Both guys kind of seemed as a bit of a project coming out of college. And Richard Sherman had 4 interceptions in his rookie year. Tariq Woolen already through 4. Well, now it's what we're
The
6 games
graphic
through.
said 3. Yeah.
Yeah, but it hadn't been updated yet, so they're tied,
Right.
and Woolen can only go up from here. So, granted, the Seahawks defense has had its coverage lapses. Picks are a big thing, and I know like a guy like Trevon Diggs for the Cowboys gets burned a decent amount, but he gets picks, and oftentimes they're in key moments. So, I mean, Woolen will continue to learn, and that's the big thing. But if a guy like Richard Sherman is endorsing this guy, it can only mean good things, And I know he's typically a defensive coach, and he turns things around. I mean, 9 points against this Arizona defense. I know they're without DeAndre Hopkins, James Conner didn't play, whatever. They got a lot of talent on that offense. To only give up 3 field goal, a field goal and then a punt that bad coverage. It was to give up only 3 points to that offense, technically not taking away that touchdown. It's a pretty good showing. So with a coach like Pete Carroll, who is a DB coach, a former DB himself, I can only expect greater and greater things from Tariq Woolen. Quentin Jefferson, his teammates, said something. I don't know if I'm quite there yet, but he said he's a walking gold jacket. I'm like, God damn, dude, this is 6 games through his rookie year. That's high praise. But I mean, if he keeps it up, it's going to be hard to disagree with, So it just means good things. I know that when we went through the offseason, even before the draft, I looked at guys like Artie Burns, like getting Justin Coleman back. You're like, okay, these should be solid corners to have. But now you've got Bryant forced the fumble that Woolen recovered, in this game. So both of those guys have been making impacts. The coverage will come there as they continue to learn and to grow in this league, but they're making plays. And that's all that matters right now, really. Because again, I know they're second in the NFC West. Like you said, everybody except for Arizona is 3-3 now in the NFC West. The Rams continue to struggle. I don't care if they won this past week. They've struggled. They lost their left tackle to Joe Noteboom for the season. Matt Stafford is doing whatever the hell Matt Stafford is doing. So they're not the juggernaut, at least at this point in the season, that they were last year. So you find yourself in some sort of weird contention spot, right? Where it's like, oh, we're kind of doing things right now. When a lot of us, I didn't see tanking necessarily. I was thinking at least 7 games for wins wise, but you're around half that already. So I don't know. When we looked at the beginning of the year, this Chargers game that's next week, I was worried about this because I'm like, oh, Justin Herbert could be an MVP candidate. You've got all these guys, but now injuries hit them. Herbert was dealing with injuries as well. They don't look like this invincible team. So I'm not saying you can go in and smash them, but I feel like you've got a much better chance, So it's been really interesting, and these rookies have been a big part of that. On the cornerback spot, on the offensive side of the ball too, with the tackles and Lucas and Cross, Ken Walker, so it's been pretty incredible. Not only Woolen, because obviously we're talking mainly about Woolen right now, but just the majority of these rookies. I'm kind of stunned. I don't know about you, but it's been pretty wild to see all this.
Yeah, and you mentioned that Richard Sherman was backing Tariq Woolen, but it's not just him, it's the whole rookie draft class that he's really giving kudos to. So it's looking promising. And I know I mentioned this last week, but that Pete Carroll 10 wins for the season, who knows? It's kind of looking like a possibility right now. We'll move on to some, unless you had something to say.
No, I mean, just thinking about that, it's kind of crazy to think about 10 wins. I mean, it's not necessarily out of earshot, so hey, we'll see.
Yeah, definitely promising as the season moves on. We'll look at some injury news here for the game against Arizona. Inactives were Artie Burns, Tease Tabor, Al Woods, Gabe Jackson, and Penny Hart. And then there were luckily no injuries against Arizona, at least nothing that has been reported yet. So that's positive news. Moving on to some team notes here. I know we've already been talking about him, but Tariq Woolen again making history. He becomes the 7th player in franchise history and just the 3rd rookie since 2000 to record an interception in 4 consecutive games. And he's also the first rookie since 1970 to record both an interception and opponent fumble recovery in consecutive games. So
that's
he's looking
52
good so far.
years. God.
Yes. Yeah. So it's impressive. I know that again, I feels like we've gone with Tariq Woolen as defensive player of the game almost every week. And sometimes you go differently, but he's consistent. And so it's hard not to think of him every week.
Yeah, I mean, it's with the graphic too, just to go back to it, I'm sorry. The graphic, it was like what was it? It was like history repeating itself or whatever. I'm like, hey man, this is Richard Sherman's. I mean, I'm sure they're really different in demeanor. I don't expect Tariq Woolen to go and trash talk anybody, but it is interesting to look at the size. Pete's always been a big, lanky corner sort of guy. We look at guys like Brandon Browner, like Trey Flowers. They've always been big sort of corners, and some of those you missed on, but this is a guy that they were excited just to draft. I was kind of more focused on Bryant. I figured Woolen would be a guy like a fringe roster guy and he'd make his way up. But some people, I mean, not to use it wrong, and I'll probably sound dumb. I mean, some people have that dog in him, and he's just continued to show that week in and week out, regardless of who we pick for defensive player of the week. He's a talking point every week, and that shows up with the coaches, So, yeah, I mean, the 1970 thing, the records, hey man, he continues to ball. This rookie class will be one of the better ones, if not, one of the better ones in Seahawks history.
Yeah, and for him to be compared to someone who was considerably one of the best corners in the game is insane. So hopefully it only goes up from here. Moving on to some league news here. On October 11th, it was reported that the photographer that Davante Adams had pushed filed a police report. So according to the Kansas City Police Department, the cameraman claims he was injured by Raiders wide receiver Davante Adams when he was pushed to the ground. If you didn't see the video already, the cameraman ran right in front of Davante as he was going into the tunnel, and Davante's instinct was to push him. So apparently the NFL, it can't actually do anything about it right now as far as giving Davante any sort of suspension or any kind of repercussion for that. But they wait until the Kansas City Police Department adjourns everything. So moving on to some more news here. Amazon has hired Marshawn Lynch. The former Seahawk will assist Thursday night football coverage with pre-produced segments, including one with an alligator. So I think we mentioned this before about Marshawn Lynch possibly joining the TV crew, but he's an entertaining guy. So I could definitely see this being a positive thing for them.
I don't know what the hell he's going to do with an alligator, but anything Marshawn Lynch does TV-wise or post-playing career-wise is always must-watch. So whatever Amazon's going to make this guy do with an alligator, Thursday Night Football has been hard to watch. I think anybody that watches football can agree. What was it? Washington and Chicago last week was like 12-7. The week before it was Denver and Indianapolis, and you and I have dreaded having Denver on Monday Night Football tonight. So it's been a tough break, but adding a guy like Marshawn should help with that. So we'll see how this goes.
Yeah. Like you said, last week's game, I don't even think they scored a touchdown. So it was brutal to watch. Yeah. And hey, let's throw an alligator in the mix and see what we can do. Moving on here to some news on October 13th. Snyder has dirt on other NFL owners. Reportedly, The Commanders owner, Dan Snyder, knows enough secrets to blow up his peers, the league office, and Roger Goodell, saying the NFL is a mafia. I feel like this has been going on for quite some time, so I don't think it's going to be the last time we hear about it. But of course, as news develops, we'll be here to report it. On the 14th, it was reported that Kamara is facing a $10 million lawsuit. The Saints running back is being sued over alleged battery outside of a Las Vegas nightclub back in February. Also on the 14th, as if we couldn't have any more of Deshaun Watson, a new civil lawsuit was filed against Deshaun less than 2 months after settling 23 lawsuits accusing him of sexual misconduct. The new lawsuit was filed against the Browns QB recently, and it's not supposed to affect his current status with the NFL. And of course, he's serving that 11-game suspension, and it sounds like there won't be any additional repercussion to that. On the 16th, today, the Titans have an agreement to build a 1.7 million square foot domed stadium. The agreement is in place with Nashville Mayor John Cooper to build the new stadium, and it will have, like I said, a dome, making it possible to host a Super Bowl and other major events.
Huh. That is not some. Well, it's interesting too because maybe I know this is just a football thing, but and football is played in all weather. But you know, if Nashville can build, well, Tennessee, whatever, Nashville, can build a dome stadium, it just shows you some other sports city should be able to build a dome. I know there's a lot of money that goes into that, but I mean, Nashville, I don't even think they necessarily need that. You know, hey, whatever.
Sounds like they just want to be in the running to be able to host, but
yeah, and I know there's a lot that goes into that. So hey, all power to them for that. That'll be really interesting to see how that goes.
Transitioning back to our Seahawks here, like we said, they have a regular season record of 3-3. They're second in the NFC West, and their next matchup is next Sunday, October 23rd, at the Los Angeles Chargers, and that's a 1:25 p.m. start.
That one will be really interesting. Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Just, really interesting. Obviously, Justin Herbert, who knows if Keenan Allen will be back. Austin Eckler, that defense is banged up, that had a lot of free agency signings. I mean, I think Khalil Mack's still around, and I don't like playing him anyway. So,
right.
That'll be a really interesting matchup on the road there in Los Angeles.